Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Christina Lenkowski. She is a publicity strategist, and she has done a lot with working with clients, especially in the podcast area. But Christina, if you would just start by talking a little bit about what it means to be a publicist and how did you get into this anyway?
Yes, that's a great question. So essentially, when someone is a publicist like myself, what we do is work on behalf of our clients to get them in front of media opportunities. So for me, I focus on podcasts. That's what I get my clients booked on. But there are, multiple different areas of media coverage, might be guest spots, TV, radio, etc. We're kind of nurturing those relationships on the back end to make sure that we're finding the right fits for our clients, and then for the media outlet or the host or whatever to make sure they're getting valuable content as well. And how I got into the PR world or the publicist world was really kind of rooted in my mom. When I was growing up, she was the director of a big nonprofit in Oregon, which is where I grew up, and she was like, I think someday you're going to be in PR. And I was like, no, Mom, I'm a writer. You don't even get me, or whatever. And, I went and got my degree in journalism and all that good stuff. And after school, I was offered two jobs at the same time. This was back when that happened. And one of them was to be a copywriter at a newspaper. And another one was to work as a PR coordinator for a large comics company in Portland. And so I kind of thought about it. And just with my personality being very social, I knew that I didn't really want to be tucked away copywriting all the time. So I decided to take the PR position, and that's what set me on this journey. And so over 15 years, I've been working in PR and worked for various agencies all over the country before I went off on my own. Worked for big companies like Cirque du Soleil, all the way down to mom and pop organizations and stores. And I just really enjoy getting other people's message out.
So what's fascinating, Christina, is we see people on television, on the news. We see people in magazines. We see people featured in newspapers sometimes. So what you're saying is that's part of what you do, is if people have a passion or a message that they want to get out, they really need to work with a publicist like you to get that message out.
Well, I always like to say it this way. You don't have to have a publicist to do that work, to get yourself in front of podcast hosts, to get yourself in front of a magazine person, etc. We do have a lot of relationships, which helps along the process. But really what it is, and most of my private clients, is just time. They don't want to spend the hours and hours and hours of pitching themselves, for these opportunities. They would just rather have someone else do it that they feel like understands their message, wants to get them in front of the correct audience, the right audience for them. And that's kind of what it really comes down to. I teach solopreneurs how to pitch themselves, and then I do pitching on behalf of clients. So I kind of have there's two ways that you can go about it. But it's just a matter of how much time you're really willing to dedicate to doing that work.
So you concentrate on podcasts.
Yes.
And so let's talk a little bit about that. How does one get onto a podcast? And what does one need to think about to do that?
Yes, those are great questions. So, the main thing that I want anyone to be thinking about before they hop on a podcast is my personal mantra that I teach, which is service over self-promotion. So you're always thinking about what value you can provide to an audience, not what can I do to talk about myself, right? No one wants to listen to a podcast where all someone is doing is just talking about how great they are and all the things they have to offer and XYZ. There needs to be value there for the audience. And that's the biggest thing that I teach people is, when you start pitching yourself to podcasts, you're not thinking about what's in it for me. You're thinking about what is the value I can provide to that audience. And when you pitch with that mindset, that's where we get the yeses.
Got it. So the advantage of being on a podcast, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, this really stemmed from my own personal experience that I started to do only podcasts. And that was when I had my daughter about 6 years ago. I decided that I no longer had the energy to be a senior account exec for a PR agency that I was working for. And so I went off on my own, and my particular area of expertise was tourism PR. So I worked with a lot of tourism destinations, and that was, really what I enjoyed working on. And so I did my first online course, all about how to do PR for tourism destinations. And I did what all the gurus told me to do, which was pay for ads, have that drive to a webinar, sell through that. And that's not to say this isn't wrong, but it did not work for me. Even though I had been in the PR game for well over a decade at that point, I didn't do any sort of publicity work. And, my thought was, oh, well, these people have been doing this. They know how this works. So I'll just do it this way. And when that was a complete and utter flop, I'm telling you guys, it was not good. The next time I went to launch, I was like, all right, I'm doing this my way. And so I started booking myself on podcasts, finding other opportunities. And the difference I saw was just night and day. Instead of me feeling like I was constantly chasing after customers, people were coming to me. People were sliding into my DMs. They were sending me emails saying, hey, I heard you on such and such, really liked what you had to say. How can I work with you? Or what products do you have to offer? Or just buying. I might not have even talked to them, but all of a sudden there's a big sale, from someone that's like, oh, I just heard you on a podcast and I really liked what you had to say. So when I saw all that, I knew that there was this area and kind of this online marketing world where people were not talking about the importance of publicity in building your brand and selling and doing these things. And I knew that I had a way that I could help people get out there more.
So getting out there by being on podcasts. And so explain really the mechanics of some of that, because I mean, clearly we're doing a podcast here, right? But
yes, very meta, yes.
But I think when you first start, you feel like you're speaking into air. You wonder who's listening because you don't see an audience, and you see the effects as time goes on. So if you would just walk the people through kind of what's the journey of people with a podcast and why does that result in business?
Well, to be clear, I don't help people with their own podcasts. So I only help them as a guest, be a guest on podcasts.
Right.
So,
right.
We can talk. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that was clear because, from the other perspective, I don't have as much insight. Right. But when it comes to being a guest on other people's podcasts, the big thing to remember, and I call this sustained spotlight. So just like you said, the first few podcasts that you're on, they might not be bigger podcasts. They might be ones where you're kind of getting your feet under you. You stumble over some words. You're not, which is okay, by the way. That all happens. You're not quite sure what's going on. You're all nervous, et cetera. But the sustained spotlight, which is the term that I like to use, means over time, you're going to see that grow and grow in your business. You're suddenly going to hit a tipping point and all these opportunities are going to open up for you. Now, I can't tell you when that's going to happen. I can't tell you if that's 5 podcasts down the road, 10 podcasts down the road. We don't know what that is. There's no scientific number to that. But when it comes to my clients, the things that they see, like I have one particular client, we've been working now together for 6 months. The opportunities that he's having come his way because he's been on podcasts is huge. And those aren't things that you can even predict. These are opportunities that he never saw coming. And so that's kind of what it's like to be on podcasts. It's going to open up these avenues for you, but you don't even know yet what those avenues are going to be. Now, when it comes to the actual journey of how you get started, the biggest thing to remember is that it all comes down to the pitch. I'm sure, Lois, you get a lot of pitches day in and day out, week in and week out from people. And I'll tell you guys that the majority of pitches that are out there that are put out into the world are not great. So, when I teach how to pitch and the way that the level that I'm pitching at, this is why I get responses from hosts and stuff like that, why we get yeses or, maybe more so than others, or we hear this really positive feedback is because the key is taking the time to find out about that show. So to do a little bit of research about the show, see who their ideal customer, who their ideal audience is, how you can provide that value. I know I keep saying that, but that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. So really, you're just going to write up a pitch, and you can use the same pitch over and over again. In my training that I do every month, we could talk about creating your pitch template, and then you can just, customize that to whomever you're generally talking to after you've done your research and send that off. It's going to get easier and easier as you go. But generally, you're sending things through email, maybe with a follow-up on an Instagram DM or something like that. But that's the actual mechanics of it is typically through email.
Got it. So you have a pitch template that people work from. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally customized to that person, but essentially my whole thing is your pitch shouldn't be more than a few paragraphs long. So, your first paragraph is going to be an intro, some kind of connection with the person, like you listen to an episode XYZ. Then you're going to get into your credibility markers. And I'm not talking about you laying out your resume or anything like that. You're going to give a couple top level things. And then you're going to give your topic ideas. And I typically do 2 to 3 topic ideas per pitch. And I got to tell you guys, people ask me that. They're like, oh, but isn't it way better if I just tell them what I want to talk about, or like what I'm an expert in, and they can tell me, the topic or XYZ? That's not how it works. The host 9 times out of 10 is going to take a topic that I give them, because I'm doing that heavy lifting for them. I've already said, I've looked at your audience. I know what I think they might be interested in. Here's a couple ideas. Now, of course, I'm always open. Like I'm always saying to them, if you want to tweak this, or if you have another idea, I'm totally open to that. But literally 9 times out of 10, a host is taking one of those topic ideas and running with it for the show. So then I just close it out, thank them, and have my signature that has links to my social, my website, all that stuff, because if they don't know me, they're immediately going to want to go take a look.
So you also then have like a target list of key podcasters that you begin to make a list of. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just based on what the client's ideal customer is. So that's one thing that you should be thinking about before you start pitching is, who is that ideal client for me? What does that person look like? And then find the shows that they're listening to. So it's not necessarily the shows that you like to listen to. I like to make that distinction for people. Sometimes they're one and the same, sometimes they are, but a lot of times it's going to be different for what your audience listens to. And one of the easiest ways to find out shows that they listen to is to ask them. Put it in your e-newsletter, put it on social media. Hey, what shows do you guys like to listen to? What business related shows, what entrepreneur related shows, whatever market that you're in, what real estate shows do you like to listen to? And just see what people come back with, because you will get some suggestions that you definitely wouldn't have thought of before.
Great suggestion. How do you get leads from podcasts?
It's a great question. So at the end of every podcast interview, pretty much, the host is going to set you up to tell people where they can go to find out more from you or connect with you or that type of thing. So at that point is where you want to have one distinct, clear call to action that you're asking people to do. Hey, if you enjoyed what I did, you can head to my website here. Maybe you have a specific page that has like a free download or something like that on it. But that's really how the leads are going to come through. And that's how that funnel is going to start for you, is by telling them exactly where to find you, making it really easy to get their hands on a free resource or something like that.
It's so for those of you who are listening, we always have the show notes that accompany the podcast. So you're always welcome to find information, and certainly Christina's information will be there for you as well. What are the biggest obstacles that people have in thinking about starting podcasts, or being on a podcast show, I should say?
Sure. A lot of people get really nervous about it. They get really up in their head, really, quite frankly, scared to go on someone else's show. They feel like that imposter syndrome rears its ugly head, and they feel like They aren't the person that should be talking about XYZ. There's so many other people that talk about XYZ. Why would someone want to listen to me? You know, this and that. And so that's kind of where I jump in with that service over self-promotion mindset, because it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about the value that you can bring to people. And the beauty of podcasts is you get to share your personality. And that's what people really gravitate towards. There's other people that do what I do. There's other people that do podcast pitching, stuff like that. But people come to me because maybe they heard me on something and they liked what I had to say. They liked my attitude on XYZ or how I felt about something. And that's where, you know, you can really differentiate yourself from other people. But absolutely the mindset stuff is the hardest obstacle. You can write your pitch, you can do all those other things. It's getting over the actually hitting send that, you know, is what's really scary for people.
That's true with just about everything, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. It really is. I actually just started a accountability membership because this is something people were asking me for. Like, I don't care if I have to come to your house and put my hand over that send button, like I am doing it. But it was funny because I had one of the gals that joined, she's like, I've been sitting on my pitches for 3 years now.
Oh.
And it's not because they're not written. It's not because they're not done. It's just, again, that mindset of like, am I really worthy of being a guest on podcasts? And I'm here to tell you, yes.
Isn't that interesting? Because we all have fears about different things, don't we? And
yep.
It doesn't matter what it's about. We have fears that will set in. So
absolutely. Fears will come up that you weren't expecting, you know, just out of nowhere. Like, wait, what? I had that the other day with my first Instagram Live I'd ever done. I did an Instagram Live interview with one of my clients, and you guys, I freaked out. Like I was totally fine until I couldn't figure out how to connect. And then I was just like, oh my gosh, this is how my clients feel like before their first podcast. I need to remember this because, you know, I'm always kind of like, no, you're good. You got it. Keep going, you know, and stuff. But I had that moment of panic like recently when doing something for the first time.
So it's great to hear even the experts have those same feelings.
Exactly.
But the good news is, what that means is it's having that resilience, that resolve to push forward when everything about you says, no, it maybe isn't the safest, smartest, best thing to do.
Yes, exactly.
So your biggest piece of advice to somebody listening about pitching a podcast, what would that be? Do you start with your story? Do you start with your target list? Do you start with?
I would start with that. To be honest, I would start with that pitch template, and I would really start with your topic ideas. I really can't. We've gotten some clients that aren't very well known on big podcasts because of those topic ideas, the things that they're willing to talk about that maybe that host hasn't heard before and they know would be of value to their audience. So I know that it's kind of counterintuitive. People want to do the shiny things. They want to start doing the research and they want to start thinking about the places they could be on and XYZ. And all that stuff is great and it is fun. But first and foremost, I really want you to dig deep and think about what you feel comfortable talking about that you know people can garner value from. And I can give a few examples of that, Lois, if that sounds good, of kind of some of those topic ideas that people really like. For instance, I myself have a chronic illness, type 1 diabetes, and I also have a daughter with special needs. And these are both things that, I can talk about building a business with having those things going on in my life as well. And how having my own business has allowed me to have the freedom to still be able to take care of the things that I need to take care of in my day-to-day life and build my business in a way that makes sense for me. And so stuff like that is things that people really, really relate to. That's the stuff that they remember. They're like, oh, I also, I can't even tell you how many times people are like, I have type 1 too. Like it, things like that where I get little DMs or stuff like that, which I just love in general anyways, because hey, diabesties, you know what's up. But I like to have those connections with people in that way. I have other clients of mine. One of them is, he was really telling his origin story of how he started his business. He's an out, gay Latino man. Then he was working in these C-suites of these huge companies in the Silicon Valley and found that he was still being discriminated against for multiple reasons. And so kind of telling how that all came to a head and why that led him to start his own business, helping underrepresented entrepreneurs learn how to do sales, which is what he specializes in. So these real conversations that people are having are the conversations that people remember. And they're the things that really drive engagement. When people hear something they really love like that, that's when you get a DM, you get an email, you have someone booking a call because you were very memorable to them.
Got it. Wow. Christina, our time is almost up. What have we missed that's really important for our audience to hear about?
Yeah, I would say the only thing that I wanted to add in there was, we've been talking about publicity, XYZ. I want you to know how it fits into marketing. So marketing itself, the marketing for your business, you need to think of it like a pie, whatever your favorite kind of pie is. For me, it's peach. And there's 3 parts of that pie: earned, owned, and paid. And paid and owned are the things that we're taught a lot as online business owners. So paid is obviously stuff you pay for, ads, maybe an influencer campaign, something like that. Owned are the channels you own. So your own podcast, if you have one, your e-newsletter, your social media channels, your website, etc. You control what goes out on those channels. And then there's earned media. And that's what publicity falls under. And that's where no money is exchanged. And a third party is putting content out into the world that features you in it. So whether that's a podcast interview, whether that's a guest post or radio, TV, like we talked about, there's all kinds of different ways that can happen. But people don't focus on the earned media as much because it's scarier than the other things. The other things have a very distinct ROI. They have a very distinct, plan, XYZ, this and that. Whereas the earned media, you might send out 10 pitches and maybe you hear back from three of those, so people have a hard time with that. They struggle with that. But here's the thing: when you do land one of those places that you want to be on, the impact of that is so much greater than some of those other things. People trust earned media way more than they trust other things that are out there on the internet. So that's where publicity falls in. That's why media is so important, and getting on podcasts and doing this other work is it really ups your know, like, and trust factor with more people than you could even imagine.
It's so good to hear that, Christina, because I think people get lost in all of, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. And after a while, it's so confusing about what fits where.
Exactly. What fits where. And I want to be clear, that's not to say that owned and paid aren't important. They are. But people just tend to forget or ignore the earned and not realize that they all kind of need to work together in order for it to be successful.
Got it. Wow. Okay. So earned can help you with that know and trust factor that's so important. Christina, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Building My Legacy podcast. What a joy to have you. And
thank you. I had a great time.
And we will have information about Christina in the show notes. And if you have any trouble getting a hold of her, please let us know. We'll be glad to get you in contact with her. And please feel free to do that. She's a fount of wonderful information. So
I try.
Yeah, you do a wonderful job. Thank you, Christina. And thank you for those of you who are listening to Building My Legacy podcast. Remember to visit our website at Build Tomorrow with the number 2 and our social media sites as well. Thank you.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.